Welcome to the flipped classroom. For this video, you guys are just filling in a foldable. So you should have your foldable in front of you, and then each slide will go through one box of your foldable. Feel free to pause the video if you need to, just so you can catch up and stay on track. You can move at your own pace. So to start us off, we've got standard form. Standard form of a quadratic is f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Ax squared plus bx plus c. We can find the axis of symmetry in standard form by simply using x equals negative b over 2a. Remember, our axis of symmetry is a vertical line, so we write it like an equation, x equals. To find our vertex in standard form, we take our axis of symmetry and plug it in, because our axis of symmetry is our x-coordinate. So we plug it in to get our y. So we have negative b over 2a, and then f of negative b over 2a. We just take our axis of symmetry, that becomes our x value, and we plug it in to find our y value. And under miscellaneous, when we're in standard form, we can find our y-intercept. You can always find your y-intercept by plugging in 0 for x. But when we do that in standard form, we end up with just c. So our y-intercept is 0, c. A couple other things to remember is that if our a is positive or greater than 0, our parabola opens up, or it is concave up. If our a value is negative or less than 0, it opens down. Looking at our graph. When we're in standard form, we have information like our axis of symmetry. We have our vertex. And we have our y-intercept. Once you find your y-intercept, you can reflect it. And then we have 3 points that we can connect with a parabola. And that's how we can graph when we have an equation in standard form. Our next form is vertex form. Vertex form is f of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k. A times x minus h squared plus k. When we have an equation in vertex form, we can find our axis of symmetry because x equals h. X equals h. Our vertex in vertex form is hk. That's why we call it vertex form, because it gives us our vertex. Couple things to remember. When we're dealing with h, it's inside the parentheses, and it's opposite, the opposite sign. Anytime you have something inside the parentheses, you have the opposite sign. So for example, you don't have to write this in your foldable, but if we had x minus 2 squared, our h would be a positive 2. Even though it has a minus sign, it would be a positive 2. And just like in standard form, if we have a positive a, our parabola opens up. And if we have a negative a, our parabola opens down. So then we can graph. Terribly not straight line. We have our axis of symmetry. We have our vertex. And then knowing our A value tells us if it opens up or down. And that is an absolutely terrible problem. Our last form is intercept form. We haven't done a whole lot with intercept form, but we have seen it. Intercept form is just our factored form. So f of x equals a times x minus p times x minus q. This looks a little different, but it's just our factored form. Our axis of symmetry in intercept form is x equals p plus q over 2. P plus q over 2. If we think about our factored form, whenever we solve for our x's, we would get x equals p and x equals q, so those are our x-intercepts. Our axis of symmetry is going to be right in the middle of those, right? Because our parabola is symmetrical, so the axis of symmetry is going to go right in half. So we're going to find our axis of symmetry by adding up our intercepts and dividing by 2. Finding the average of it in the middle. Our vertex, just like the other ones, we're going to plug in our axis of symmetry for our x. So our x value is p plus q over 2. And we plug that in to get our y value. So f of p plus q over 2. In intercept form, we also have our x-intercepts. This is why it's called intercept form. And our x-intercepts are p0, q0, and just like in vertex form, our p and our q are inside parentheses, so p and q are opposite signs. Right, so for example, we had x minus 2 times x plus 1, our p would be 2, and our q would be negative 1. Opposite signs. And just like with our other forms, if we have a positive a out front, it opens up. If we have a negative a, it opens down. Looking at our graph, we've got our axis of symmetry. We have our vertex. And we have our x-intercepts. And those are the 3 different forms of a quadratic equation. I hope you enjoyed my video.